Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But here we are once again to bring you some amazing Phish conversation. This is HF Pod. I'm RJ. I'm here with Brian and Megan. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey, RJ.
How's everybody doing?
I'm doing great. Doing great. We're in the middle of one of the best World Series, maybe of our lifetime. I'm pretty pleased right now overall.
Wow, that's a big statement.
It's a big
It really is.
statement. We
Mhm.
haven't seen the finish, so like it may end up, terrible. The last two games may be awful, but like my God, we're in a good spot right now. Great spot right now.
Great spot. Great spot. Even
Well-
though our teams are out of it and have been out of it for weeks at this point, it's still exciting.
But then who do you root for? Like, which teams are you rooting for?
Well, I'm rooting for the Dodgers.
Okay.
But I like the Blue Jays. I like the Blue Jays, the way that their team is constructed. I love a lot of their pitchers. Their offense is amazing. So I'd be totally pleased with them winning. But like, I'm going for the Dodgers here. I'm an NL guy. Shohei Ohtani is the Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth of our time.
Oh, is he
I'm
the one
fully
that pitched
embracing
the
that.
no-hitter and then he got 3 home runs in one game?
Not a no-hitter. That will be even more intense, but he did strike out 10 players, 10 batters, and got 3 home runs. So you knew that.
But
That's never been
he
done
didn't
before in baseball history. It was maybe the greatest
really.
performance in all of baseball. Yeah, there's been no pitchers who also hit on this
Well, that's
level
what
since,
I
like,
that's
the
what I was confused
1920s.
about.
You
Yeah,
are,
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
realize that people did that. I thought they only pitched. I didn't realize they
Extremely
also hit.
rare. Extremely rare. Like generationally, historically rare.
So then he didn't pitch a no-hitter, but he struck out 10.
So I got 10 hitters, 10 batters,
10
and then
batters.
he hit 3 home runs and helped to eliminate the suburban Chicago Brewers from the playoffs and hopefully teach them a lesson that I think a lot of sports owners need to learn, that if you are a billionaire, you should spend money on your team or you should sell it and stop trying to convince the public that you are like some mom and pop shop owning a small market hokey baseball team that just may have enough to compete this year. Come on.
Don't run it like a nail
Brian.
salon, right, Brian?
That's it, Meg. You know exactly where I was going.
Brian, you handle this so much more maturely than I do because the Dodgers knocked the Phillies out of the playoffs. So I'm like, I'm not cheering for the Dodgers. I don't care what. if they're in
Yeah,
the
you
NL
got to
or
hold your
AL.
grudge. Yeah.
I have a grudge against them. It's annoying, and yeah, it is. But it has been an epic series.
The only team I have a grudge against is the Houston Astros because they're a bunch of fucking cheaters. After 2016, I've got no grudges. I'm just here, just hanging out, just having
Just a
fun
vibes
watching
guy.
baseball. Just a vibes guy. That's all we are.
Vibes guy. Ever since the summer in Boulder, you're a vibes guy now.
That's it.
Yeah.
Adopting a new mantra.
Okay, so we are going to talk about Fluffhead today. Definitely a vibes song. Has nothing to do with the
Totally.
composition. It's just about the vibes. Who gives a shit about the changes? It's all about the energy.
Everyone chanting for it did not give a shit about the changes. The
Yep.
only person who cared about the changes was Mike.
This is the only song that I know of that has been shelved because of a very particular person saying that they don't want to play it anymore. So that's cool. It's got a unique story.
The song's been de-songed. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
De-songed?
Yeah.
We don't know that one anymore.
We got some great reviews on Apple Podcasts this week. Keep them coming, please. If you want to support what we're doing, you can go to osirispod.com/premium and support us for like $5 a month and get ad-free episodes. So think about that. We do have a ton of awesome voicemails. We are going to get to them. We are going to do another mailbag episode soon, maybe within the next couple of weeks. We need to figure that out, but keep the voicemails coming. I am listening to all of them. They're great. We are keeping on track here to go straight into our Fluffhead discussion because we have another podcast right after this where we are going to be talking about the book The Shining and the movie The Shining. As you notice, I call them books and movies, not films and novels, but it's because I'm from Ohio. I went to public school, people, so we just call them movies where I'm from. So,
Flicks. Well, it's spooky season. We're doing it right this week.
This is our first truly themed.
Yeah.
I refuse to say that phrase, Meg, so I was just going to let you say it. Thank you.
I love it. I don't know why you don't like it. It's too like juvenile. Come on, you went to public school. You grew up in Ohio.
Yeah, you get your ass kicked for saying spooky season.
I feel like it's one of those juvenile things that like people in their 30s and 40s have adopted as like, hey, it's okay for me to speak this way. And it's not. It's not. You're not 9 years old. Come on.
I'm sorry, I'm around 9-year-olds all day, so it's my fault.
This is
but
okay. This is
I
very
do.
fair.
I try not to say much of what they say, but I do kind of get into that. I'm into spooky season. Sorry,
It's okay.
sue me.
We won't have a crash out over it here. We will go straight into it. It's gonna be a fun episode. We are gonna actually, Brian, do you want to? Should we wait until the end of the episode to talk about what the next couple episodes look like, or do we want to like preview anything, or do we want to just get straight into Fluffhead?
Yeah, I'll preview the month. We got quite a bit going on here. We've got a couple unique episodes coming up. Next week, we are talking about A Wave of Hope. That will be our next Mount Rushmore. So we're coming back with some new notable 4.0 Mount Rushmore chatter here next week. Following that, I need to update our schedule here. My goodness. We will have the week of November 10th. We're going to have the great Rob Mitchum on the podcast to talk about his ongoing series. He's been writing, I've been reading his Phish history blog since the mid 2010s, but he got it going in earnest on a daily basis in, I believe, the fall of 2019, where he committed to writing about every Phish show from fall 94 through the end of 1.0 on its 25th anniversary. Fascinating series, every single show from there on. We're going to dive deep into kind of his thoughts on the latter part of the 90s with Phish, some of the themes he unearthed in the final 2 years of 1.0 Phish, his thoughts as he goes into 2.0 Phish, which I'm extremely excited to hear because, man, the jamming in 2.0 is like Rob Mitchum jamming, but Rob Mitchum was not there for 2.0 and is kind of refused to listen to 2.0 until he can dedicate the time to this project. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Other music, we'll probably get into, some like favorite albums of the year type of thing. It'll be a great conversation. And then the following week, we are going to have Mike Ayers on, who just released the book, The Oral History Sharing in the Groove, which looks at the jam bands in the 1990s, the rise of the scene, the big bands, and what they did from a promotional standpoint and a DIY standpoint to really push beyond the confines of record label support, radio support, or lack thereof, where there were successes, where there were challenges, and kind of the through lines throughout. I'm 30 pages from the end of that. It's been a really informative and exciting read that has gotten me listening to a ton of Panic, a ton of Mo, a ton of Medeski, Martin and Wood, even a little Blues Traveler, just out of curiosity, just to like refresh my ears.
Nice.
Ooh, early 90s vibes, mid 90s vibes.
So we'll have that, and then rounding out the month, RJ's selected Rushmore. We will all be selecting it, but RJ said we have to do this before the end of our first year. That will be Possum. We will do so today's Fluffhead, next week's Wave of Hope, end of November is Possum as we round out the first year of our Mount Rushmore series. So a lot of cool stuff coming up. I'm pretty excited about these conversations.
Thank you, Brian. And I will just add, for next week, when we do the Wave of Hope Rushmore, we're gonna have Brian Murray from Dogs in a Pile on for a little bit, and we're going to talk to the guys from the Phoenix Presents, the people who put on the Music on the Mountain, the fundraiser for the Divided Sky Foundation up in Vermont. So they're going to talk to us about what they're up to. They're going to do more. I don't think I'm allowed to say this. They're going to do more events, including, there's a couple in December that are on sale already, but they're expanding it beyond just the one that's in Vermont. So they're going to come on and talk to us about their love of Phish and also raising money for the Divided Sky Foundation. And Brian, if you haven't listened to Dogs in a Pile, we can send some stuff out there for you to listen to. But Brian's great. He's a friend, so it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, RJ, if you want to send me some, I'll post some Dogs in a Pile on our socials that people can
I will
to.
do that. Yeah. Also, due to an urgent meeting that we just had. We're going to do our Shining book and movie discussion on this stream. So we're not going to end the stream. We're just going to keep it going here, so we don't have to leave the waiting room. We don't have to send out links to people. So you guys just stick around. We'll be here for the next 1 hour and 44 minutes, if anyone's keeping count. Okay. Fluffhead. What is this song all about, Megan? What's the deal?
Fluffhead is the quintessential Phish song. One of them for sure. To me, it's like Reba, Harry Hood. It just defines that prog rock complex composition style that Trey was writing in the early years, and is the kind of song that only Phish could write and perform. Fluffhead debuted with Phish on December 1st, 1984 at Nectar's with the Dude of Life singing vocals. And the dude wrote the 3 intro verses about his brother who was dying of cancer. And the song contained in the introductory Fluffhead section and the arrival sections. And part of what was called Fluff's Travels appears on the white tape in 1986. And the song appears as Fluffhead and Fluff's Travels on Junta. And the song is really broken up into segments. And the first part is the song segment with the lyrics that the dude wrote. And then there's Fluff's Travels, which is an 11-minute composition that has 6 parts. And these 2 parts were combined in 1987 to the song that we know today. So some of these segments were played live as parts of other songs, but around February 1988 is when all of the sections found their way into what we call Fluffhead today. To complicate things a little bit further, the band continued to play segments of the composition live kind of outside Fluffhead proper, but really from 1988 on is when it really cements as the song Fluffhead. And what's interesting is from 1987 to 1994, the song was played an average of 23 times a year. And shout out to all the tapers. So we have tapes of these early shows because it is so important to listen to these early versions of the song. And what's cool is by 1993, you can really hear the mastery and the way the band is in front of the notes instead of chasing them. And by the late 90s, it starts being played less. It goes down to single digits. So it's averages between 5 and 6 times a year from 95 to 2000. And I think the tight composition was really challenging for their band. And there's perhaps a lack of practice, I would imagine, and just their interest in jamming and improv really affected their ability to play the composition well. Obviously, notably, never played in 2.0. Like Brian mentioned earlier, Mike Says No during the Fluffhead chant at IT in 2003. And of course, it has this triumphant and emotional opening at the reunion shows in Hampton, 2009. It opened the show that night for the first time in 18 years and only the 5th time ever. And it was a real statement that the band was back and committed to playing their hardest songs. And it was played an average of a few times a year throughout 3.0, but there was an 18-month gap, 2014 to 15, without a Fluffhead performance. What's amazing, though, to me is that in 4.0, the song is only played a few times a year, but I think that's often because there's so much competition for songs to be played now with the repertoire being so large. But it is a real renaissance for Fluffhead. It is played so well now, and it has the tightness that we love about 4.0. And it was surprising for me to see those numbers that it's only played a few times a year, because I feel like I kind of hear it a lot live, but it's only played a few times a year now, but played so well. And Brian curated a list of 19 versions, and then we added on the Junta version of Fluffhead and Fluff's Travels to our list of best versions. And there are 3 versions on Live Bait, Volume 5, 17, and 19.
Those are crucial additions, those Live Bait additions. Really made...
They are.
Yeah, you have to have those.
Had to do it. Thanks, Meg, for that. One thing I wanted to say, and I'm sorry to take us back because I wrote a note about this and then I forgot. So Brian, if you want to say anything about Fluffhead besides where we're going with the Mount Rushmore, you're free to do so. After I say that, we really loved getting all the feedback on our draft that we did last week, and some people told us that we did an amazing job, and some people told us that we were horrible idiots. And this is the lesson for giving free content to people for decades. But I do think we had fun doing it, and we will look at those comments. I don't know. We're not going to change anything, but I think we all looked at the comments and kind of had some thoughts. I had one regret of a show that I wish I had drafted. We probably all have one. I think but I think we want to do more drafts like that. Brian has no regrets Just like
I have one that I might have
like Tim
changed.
Riggins, no regrets.
But I think in
Did my
general,
research. I delivered it the way I wanted to deliver it. I got some shows in there that needed to be in there. I got the big ones. I feel really good. I think we did a good job. I think it's a challenging project. I think that similar to the Tweezer draft, it is a well that we can go back to, and we can do our 26 to 50 list and then
Yeah.
our 51 to 75. Like, we can start to build this out till it makes sense. You know, we're going to probably do another Tweezer draft in 2026. The stuff that we picked is not going to be available. Some of these drafts just require multiple listens. To anyone out there saying that we're idiots and that we don't know what we're talking about and why would we put that list out? Hey man, I look forward to your 500 episode podcast that breaks down this band in competition with ours, spends all the time researching, developing the level of confidence and knowledge that requires to deliver this information to people, and we can talk then.
Yeah, exactly. I also think that, our intention was to put out 25 shows for 25 years. And so people nitpicking about what we called it or what we do or do not know how to add seems really kind of sad to me, because what we're doing is making a list that was really hard to make and also really fun to make, and was really just about getting people talking and talking about shows and thinking about this band that we love. So thank you for those of you that engaged with it in that way. And if you have problems with it, like Brian said, you can make your own. You can do your own podcast and your own list. I would love to see it.
Hey man,
I haven't seen any
press.
posted.
All press is good press. So I'm happy they're chattering. I'm happy they're talking. Let's just, let's have an actual conversation about it.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Well, how many? Yeah. Okay. I think we have I think we're at about 1,000 episodes. So go get to like a couple hundred, and then
We just got to give a shout out here. Tyler Riggs is doing an amazing job sitting in as the troll of today's episode, saying that Vegas 04 being left off of our list is a travesty.
That's awesome.
Look, if I can be a little sincere for a second, like if this was the top 25 shows that meant the most to me in the last 25 years, you can absolutely guarantee that night 2 of Vegas 04 will be on my list. That is one of the most meaningful evenings of my entire life. It changed me in really dramatic ways, and I still ride for that show, even though when I listen back to it, I cringe half the time because I know what went on in that room. And unless you were there, you don't know what went on in that room, man. And that's all that matters.
Oh my God, we got to cut that and put that out of context for Brian. If you weren't in the room, you don't know what was going on.
And then measure it against my tone that's sarcastic versus my tone that's actually sincere.
It's true.
We don't have time. This is going to be such a diversion, but I just got to say, Brian, I think I probably have told you this, but the first night of Vegas 04, one of my friends, I had to go and sit on the stairs outside the Thomas and Mack Center for like 15 minutes because I just had it was just too much. One of my buddies left, and we called him during set break. We were like, "Where are you?" And he was in his closet at home. He lived in Vegas. So he was in his closet, and he was like, I can't leave my closet. He was at the show, and then he ended up in his closet. And then 2 hours later, after the show, we called him. We were like, "Where are you?" And he was in CVS trying on sunglasses. So,
it's amazing.
Vegas, can I just add on to that, because probably told this story here, whatever. We definitely bought mushroom chocolates from like a 12-year-old girl out of her backpack, like very, very short. And a friend of mine ate one, and he kind of lost his mind midway through the first set. And he decided that he needed to eat a cigarette to determine if he was still himself or not.
This is the craziest thing ever.
And he decided that if he threw up, that he was still himself. But if he enjoyed it, he had lost his mind. And it went right down the hatch, and he just kept on dancing. He was like, "I'm lost, I'm gone." And, it was a good time.
God, that's fantastic. All right, good. Okay, so with all that being said, should we just get into the first pick here?
After talking about Vegas 04, it's a perfect time to talk about the most difficult composition in Phish's catalog.
Yeah, exactly. This is, it really is. And, as with all of our choices, we did not take this lightly. It took a lot of debate and conversation, but
a lot of anger in the text thread,
a lot of
people
anger.
Were really, really Megan defending Claude versions and being like, this is the best Claude ever. I've never seen her so passionate.
It's true.
It's true. It's
all
true.
true.
Megan, why don't you tell us what our first choice is?
Okay, I'd love to. This is a choice that I advocated for being on the list because I was going back to listen to our list that we put together, and I stopped after my first one and I said, I want to go back and hear the Junta version again because I've always loved this version. And to me, this is such a special version. And I've always felt it was kind of the closest that Trey ever really wanted this song to be to like how he felt when he wrote it. And it's the acoustic guitar is so warm and there's something that makes it seem so special. And the piano is incredible. And you've got that Zappa style singing from Trey. And the things that I love and my favorite versions of Fluffhead and what I want from a Fluffhead is an absolutely perfectly played composition. And it is so challenging, but it really, when they nail it and they're on top of it as opposed to chasing it, it's just so special and it feels so tight and crisp. And then I want a really emotional payoff at the end, that Trey solo to just come up and I want it to just build and give me goosebumps and give me all the, Harry Hood style feels. And there's something really refreshing about the peak in this Fluffhead on Junta. It has a bunch of people in it. It has that audience feel, which I think is what I fell in love with about Phish that makes Phish so special, is their connection to the audience. And there's just such a joyful energy behind this peak. And then the acoustic outro. What would happen if Trey just picked up the acoustic guitar and started playing the acoustic outro in Fluffhead on stage? People would lose their minds. That would have made Mondegreen Day 4 unbelievable, even though they'd already played Fluffhead. But anyway, this is a special version, and I really appreciate that you guys were on board for having this on our list. It's, to me, the kind of quintessential studio Phish, too. I don't know if Phish has ever done the studio better than this song.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like it also just takes such serious like confidence or delusion or whatever to put a song like that like on your debut album. I mean, I know they weren't like going
Totally.
to major labels at the time, but like just to like do that, to pull it off is awesome. But yeah, it's a serious jam. It's like a serious jam and a serious composition on an album. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that when this was brought up, we weighed, are we just doing live versions? Because I think we flirted with this idea that we could include studio versions in recent weeks as we've been talking about updates to the series, and I think it just made sense here. I don't. There's maybe one or two other versions or other songs that it would make sense with a Rushmore pick being from a studio album, but it absolutely makes sense here. The recording is really pristine. It's really warm. The way that they utilize the studio, there's like a xylophone in the middle of the Fluff's travels. There's weird effects. There's noises, especially at the end during the peak. There's so many voices and so much like brewing up. It honestly sounds, Meg, you said this is one of their best studio cuts ever. I think, or maybe best. Like I think it possibly is. Like this to me feels almost like a road less traveled for the band, where they really take a song and really figure out how it should sound in the studio, what instrumentation needs to be used, where things need to be accentuated, where like there needs to be like 7 layers of voices or a couple different layers of music. Like it sounds like a band that has figured out how to take their sound and turn it into a studio production. It's unbelievable. I was listening to it last night. It also has this thing that a lot of the live versions, we're going to talk about one that has this, but even there, I think it really showcases how difficult the song is, because you can just imagine this band doing retakes and overdubs and understanding like how tight certain changes need to be and how things need to fade in, fade out in a way that I think is almost impossible to do live. And so you get this just like real sense of living inside of the composition and the way the composition is supposed to make you feel, that for as amazing as these live versions we're going to talk about are, it's really hard to replicate that outside of the studio. So this is just like, this sets the foundation for what this song should be. And in a lot of ways, when I listened to it, I mean, it of course made me think of how just amazing Junta is as an album. But it, it really sounds like that pure version of Phish, that as they would change, as they would evolve, as their goals would change, we get further and further away from this. But this is, these are the origins of who this band is.
So I think that was a great addition to the list, Megan. So thanks for that. There's now, Brian, we went through a bunch of I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think about this song, and we had a little bit of a back and forth about this on our text chain, but when you think about the song, there's obviously what you just said, like describing, the composition, and then there's like the live, experience of it, and then there's like the rare versions where it really goes off the beaten path and is a type 2 jam after the composed part. And I think we're gonna, we have at least we have some of those. But in terms of these early 90s versions where, we have what, probably 6 or 7 before we get into 99, that we, maybe 10 that we listen to before, between like 89 and 99. So I listened to all of those and I didn't hear like a ton of difference. I mean, there were like little things, like there's like a little more of the like little pulsing guitar thing during the Claude section, or Mike would be like a little more prominent, or you could hear Page's piano more, but the jam, like the compositions are kind of the same. And then the endings are just building to that peak. And then the endings are all kind of the same. So when you listen to like those, I don't know, 10 versions from the early 90s, which is probably what everyone who has listened to them for a long time and collected tapes and listened to those early shows would recognize as like what they heard as a, early to mid 90s Fluffhead. Like what were you listening for? And how do you think we landed on the one that we chose, like from that kind of era of the well played, tightly, executed Fluffheads?
Yeah, and I think, to your point, like this will all make sense as we unveil the list, but there is kind of this journey that Fluffhead has gone on since its origins as one of the earliest Phish songs, and then a song that the band noticeably, famously stepped back from for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about. Part of what makes Fluffhead so special is that it is a snapshot when you listen to these kind of early to mid 90s versions. And I would say probably go from 93 to 96 as kind of this window of the band where their gear was suddenly in top order. They're playing in large rooms where the songs are being, really broadcast at a volume and an intensity to reach every person in the room, which really sounds like modern Phish, even when it's 30, 35 years ago. And then the band as well, from a show structure standpoint, we're just simply a different band than they are today. The goal wasn't necessarily to jam out of their songs. It was to showcase what their songs could be in a, structural sense, being it the first set, second set, to raise energy, to showcase dynamics, to showcase different styles of music, to showcase humor. And Fluffhead was one of those songs that when it was shown, it was almost, if you listen, to a lot of 92, 93, 94, even 95, 96 shows, the showcase of those shows sometimes is not necessarily a type 2 jam. It's, holy crap, we just got a pristine version of Fluffhead. And so within that window, 92 to 96, we wanted to highlight a version that we felt really, really showcases this band that night after night is getting on stage and playing very, very difficult compositions in a way that is engaging listeners in a manner that you're not finding anywhere else. Quick shout out to Sharon in the Groove, which I'm just about to finish. One of the big things they talk about is this dilemma that labels had over these bands, where they could see that these bands were selling out venues night after night after night and growing their fan bases, and particularly Phish. But none of these songs, like Fluffhead, you're never going to put out as a single. Even if it's one of the best Phish songs and one of the most representative Phish songs to who the band is, you're never going to put this out as a single. So this band is doing this thing that is completely against the grain of what is, expected in modern rock in the 90s. So within that, we had 3 versions we really zeroed in on, and we decided on one. Um, the 3 that we were looking at, I'll just highlight kind of the work behind the scenes, were 22093 from the Roxy, 52694 from the Warfield in San Francisco, and 111195 from the Fox, which, and I know that there's apparently some issues with the tapes from the Fox, but if we can get a Fox box set, would
Oh,
make a couple of
yes.
us really happy. Fox 95 box set, like I'd go and buy that immediately. And most of my music is streamed, so like getting me into a store to physically buy a copy of it, come on now. Anyway, we ultimately landed on 22093, and the reason why I thought this was the right version is 1993 is kind of this go between of there's still kind of these collegiate prankster, you don't know about this band literally other than word of mouth. I guess they've done an MTV interview at this point in time, but like you really don't know about this band other than word of mouth, and they're still living and breathing in these songs. Whereas when I listen to the 52694 and 111195 versions, I hear a band that is evolving and changing more rapidly than they were in early 1993. That said, there are moments in this, like the feedback that Trey implements through many of the changes, that showcase this band starting to mess around with the compositions while still delivering note for note, change for change, everything that you are looking for within these compositions. So while I think all 3 of these versions could have a seat at this table, we ultimately landed on 22093. Very famous show, obviously, the Roxy in Atlanta, but a version that when you listen to this could be essentially a stand-in for the way the band attacked compositions and attacked ideas in the early 90s.
I don't know if this is crazy to say, but I think that this version, 22093, is the most perfect classic live version of Fluffhead ever. It doesn't have a single, not even like a hint at a mistake. It's so tight and it is so on top of the comp. Like they are ahead of every beat and they just nail every single moment of this song. And Trey's solo on the peak, the minute it rips out, it's just like every time I listen to it, just goosebumps up and down my arm. It's total 93 crispness and mastery. And Paige has got his new baby grand and he's just going at it. Like he sounds unbelievable in the clod. And he's so soulful in that section. And I just feel like, I think what you said, I totally agree that the 94 and 95 versions, you can feel them pulling at it, like distorting things and stretching it out. And that's what's so exciting about 94 and 95. And it's thrilling to listen to those versions. I mean, that 111195 version will just the authority that Trey's playing with is unbelievable. And I love the 94 version, also a perfect version. But there's something that's so, I feel like if you have to have a live version of Fluffhead that's just completely clean and perfect and captures that early essence of that hungry band that nailed these compositions so perfectly.
So I just want to say that well, there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, I think I agree with both of you, and I think if you could make the argument for the 93 version, you could make the argument for 52694, 111195, or the Clifford Ball. Really, I think they're all similar in that they all represent what that year sounded like. You know, like they all have just a
Yeah.
little bit of that year. I do think the 93 version, I think everyone knows just a couple weeks before this, the Roxy shows is when Paige first got the piano on stage. So, that was like a pretty new addition to the live setup, and it just added so much to the sound, and it was louder. And I think that sticks out a lot more. Like those other versions are great also. There's some chatter in the chat about whether this is the most difficult Phish song to play. Technically, I just texted Scott, who's in Reprise, that plays keyboards in Reprise. He said, in his opinion, it is the hardest. It's Ice, and I know that one thing that I've watched them practice a lot. So it's ice, which is extremely hard. But the Ass Festival part of Gula Papyrus is like really for 4 people at once. I think that's part of it, is for all 4 of them. That's why Fluffhead is like, and you guys, just listen to the album version or any of them. All 4 of them are doing different things for 14 minutes or whatever. I mean, it's total madness. So at least in Scott's opinion, it's ice, Fluff's travels, and that part of Gula. Okay. So we have 22093 on the board. We'll take a quick break and then we'll come back and we're going to do the big reveal for the last 2. So stick around. We'll be right there. All right, guys. So those of you who are watching live, don't forget, we're going to go straight into the library card episode right after this. So just hang out, just put us on in the background while you cook dinner or do whatever. We're here. We're family friendly today.
We are.
Okay.
We're not
I'll
making
keep
you
it
guys
together.
change any places, anything like that. Can I address one comment in the chat just because
Please.
I don't want William Welsh to lose his brain. First and foremost, I want to introduce him to a great resource called phish.net. But secondly, I want to just note that there were no versions of Fluffhead played at Hampton in the late 90s. However, I think the version he is thinking of that is a little extended, a little sloppy at times, and kind of telling of where the band was going with Fluffhead in the late 90s is the version from 11/23/97 from Winston-Salem, which is on the Hampton box set. So that's possibly where any sort of confusion comes in. But if you're thinking of a different version, let us know. But that is, you don't have to ask Grok for this. We don't want you to have to do that.
I also want to shout out the Clifford Ball version that you brought up, RJ, because there's something special about festival Fluffheads. And I noticed that when I was listening, there's just something special about being in that big of a space with the band and then playing Fluffhead. So I think there's those moments hit extra hard and sound really awesome on tape too, because the crowd is just so absolutely pumped. That's a great version though. It's pretty flawless.
I also went into this re-listen in my head. I try to make a list before I actually listen of what I think is going to make my top 4. And this was on I think this will make my top 4.
Yeah.
It's a little bit rough around the edges compared to this, and it doesn't have something that we are going to talk about here with our final 2 versions. Hint, hint, hint. That said, whenever we do the best second sets draft, you can guarantee that one of us will take that, because that second set, just watch the video of that. The woman that's dancing on the streamer, on the ropes, Ben and Jerry coming out during Brother, the energy as Trey looks around as they do like 6 different set closers in a row, and he's just counting off Gula, and his like beard is like down, like meeting with his chest hair. He looks amazing during that show. And yeah, that version is a ton of fun. I felt like we had to give a little bit more of a nod to the precision of a version like 22093.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so also where was that comment here? Tyler Riggs just said, listen to Trey's interview with Corey Wong today. So Trey was interviewed on Corey Wong's podcast, which is called Wong Notes from Premier Guitar, and Trey was talking about the compositions being designed for all members to align in harmony on each note. It's pretty cool. So check out that interview. Okay, so the next version is we're going to, I guess, one of my perspectives, I think we all agree on this, but if someone's gonna be like, what's a great version of Fluffhead to listen to, we'd probably say maybe something like 22093 if you really want to hear, perfect composition, perfect execution. But I might say, well, you should check out this one that goes like totally off the rails and has a complete crazy jam that goes into all these wild places and becomes like an amazing piece of improv. So that was our next choice here, which we can all talk about. But I'll just start by saying that this version, even the intro to like the introductory chords are like a little bit spacey. It's like a slightly slower tempo, and the outro of the 7/24/99 version, kind of melting into this perfect summer 99 droning jam, is just So awesome. And I think this one probably was like all of our first choices, right? I mean, this is like Mike's driving this jam after the outro, and then Trey hops in, and it just has this, of course, just like most of these Summer 99 pieces of improv, there's like a little bit of that space swirling, echoing, droning, and it just Trey jumps in after Mike kind of drives the jam for a while, and it gets totally weird and out there, and just turns into, I think it's like 32 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Just an amazing piece of improv, like an amazing jam period, should be like on everyone's list. But in terms of Fluffhead, like the composition itself, I think is well played, and it's Summer 99. So, it's crazy and hot and weird and, way out in outer space, but also just the jam is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is not a pristine version by any means. This is one of my, 7/24/99. This is one of my favorite shows to simply just look at the set list. I know that like people are like, oh, show on like set list on paper, it doesn't matter. It's all the music. Like, man, sometimes Phish plays a set list that like is just so much fun to just look at and see like what they did. And this is one of those shows. It's totally bizarre. You open with 2 compositions. One of them happens to go into a 15-minute long jam that makes it a 30-minute version. You get a ton of weird bust outs, some sick at this stuff. Trey falling over at the end of the second set, a 4-song encore of all bust outs. This is kind of, when you think about like the various turns that happen post Fall 97, where the wheels start to fall off a little bit, the exhaustion is there, the rock star lifestyle is taking over, but they're still making brilliant music. This version is kind of one of those moments you can look at, and this show is kind of one of those turning point shows. I think ultimately, though, when we think about Fluffhead, for a long time, this was looked at as almost like the beginning of the end for Fluffhead, because for 10 years, they're not going to play this song, and it's just not going to be a part of the rotation. Until they come back in Hampton and reinvent themselves again. But I think one of the interesting things about this is Fluffhead has kind of taken on this life of its own in 3.0, 4.0, and especially recently as it's become a relatively regular jam vehicle, that there are ideas that come out of this song that I don't think anybody would have predicted or expected pre 7/24/99. So this feels like a
Mhm.
really important statement, even if the band wasn't planning anything like. But you think 25 years into the future, a song like Fluffhead is now one of the old reliables. It brought Phish back from the brink. And it ultimately has showcased that anything can be jammed at any place during any show, which is one of the more exciting aspects of Phish, nowadays. And a lot of that starts with a jam like this.
I think that's what's really interesting about this version is that it doesn't kind of adhere to what the song really is. It is looser, it's super chill. It has this like lackadaisical millennial sound to it, but it also, like you said, Brian, kind of sets a stage for what Phish will become, which is we can take any song and do whatever we want with it. And this was one of those first versions where you take a song that is about a tight composition and you just apply your own style to it. And their own style of where they were at that moment, right? So they're taking a song that defined their early years and was tight and crisp and about composition and very, very planned out, very structured, and they're really just pulling that apart here. And I love it. It's so gauzy. I listened to it on the walk to work today, and it's just so laid back and nowhere to go, nowhere to be. You can just hear Big Cypress in the future in this. It's dark, quirky at points. It's just I love how of the moment it is. It really defines who Phish was in 1999. And I think anytime you have a version of a song that does that, it's awesome. When they can take a song and apply their sound to it in a way that's really definitive of that era is great. I feel like it had to be on here, even though it kind of defies what the song really is. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just has something totally different. I was just thinking when you were talking about Trey, it's amazing for all the years of serious partying that they went through that none of them really had very many embarrassing moments on stage. You know, they really kept it pretty professional.
Totally.
I mean, 04 is
Pretty
a little bit
amazing.
different, but like they were having huge parties backstage for years and years and years, and like of course some of the like compositions suffered or whatever, but like there weren't a lot of like embarrassing moments, which is like kind of amazing at this point.
No, and even in their like worst years, you can still find amazing shows. They were still having transcendent moments, even though I think that's just their talent and the amount of they played together. I think when you do anything that much, even if you're fucking around while you're doing it, you can do really well. I mean, it's right. We're going to be talking about this when we talk about The Shining and Stephen King and his writing of it. But a lot of artists can do a lot of things when they're pretty fucked up. It's pretty crazy. Sorry, I forgot we're family friendly today.
Yep. It's okay.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say 7/27/03 Raleigh is like the only moment I can really think of where everything spilled out on stage and there was a lot of animosity. And what is 7/27/03 followed up by? The 5-show run from 7/29 to 8/3 that is like brilliant Phish. So like they were balancing. It is wild to think like the parties, if you look at set list times and like set times from especially the late 90s, you've got these like 58-minute sets followed by like an hour 15-second set to like try to make up for it, but like they were just ready to get back and hang out with the crew behind the stage. But yeah, like there were so many moments where they were still able to come to the table, and I think that Fluffhead really shows it. Like this is a song that they ultimately decided was kind of representative of where things had gone wrong, and yet this is a version that 23 years later, I forget what year this live bait came out, but they remastered it, put it out as a studio soundboard cut for all their fans to listen to because they kind of recognized, even amidst all the darkness, there were these brilliant moments.
Yeah, I'm so glad we have this. It would be really sad if we didn't have this on archival release.
Yeah. This is one of the live bait 5, I think, is what it's on. Does that sound right?
It is.
No,
I can check. It's on Live Bait 19.
19. Oh, there's one. There's one that's on Live Bait 5. Maybe.
Yeah, that's 8/17. That's Clifford Ball.
Oh, that's Clifford Ball. Okay. Okay. So who wants to bring us home here with the last version?
I feel like I kind of need to for obvious reasons. So we were talking about like the arc of Fluffhead, and there were a few versions for me. Well, there's one version for me in the modern era that seemed to be a stand-in for Fluffhead as a pure song, and that was the 3609 version. But I ultimately stepped back from that based on our conversations of, look, as great as Fluffhead has been in the 3.0, 4.0 era as just a strict composition compared to where it was in the late 90s, I think we would be lying to ourselves if we said that there were any that compared to what we heard in the mid. Like if you're looking for a pure version of Fluffhead, the mid 90s are where you go without question. And I don't really think that it's worthwhile to have one of those versions compete with those. So then we started thinking about, well, where is Fluffhead today? And many of the versions of Fluffhead that are played in the 4.0 modern era are jammed out. They're 20 plus minutes. Nashville 21 was kind of this reemergence of the jamming ethos in Fluffhead. The last 4 or 5 minutes are very, very cool. Tula 21 is a fantastic version that opens the show, jams into NICU, and really sets up a really cool fluid show. And then there were great versions from MSG 22, Dix 23, a bunch of others. But there's one that is spiritually tied to the one we just talked about in a lot of ways. And and really showcases that modern Phish can kind of meet the Junta version of Phish in a really memorable way, where they're able to deliver tight, like enthusiastic, kind of thrilling theatrical versions of their compositions, but then in a second transition and have the dexterity and the freedom and the creativity to just see where these songs go. And we listened through a lot of these versions, a lot of these jam heavy Fluffheads from the 4.0 era. And then when we kept coming back to was, and I can't believe we're about to have the second Rushmore version from this run. I'm going to get just creamed in so many of my text threads for doing this, but you know what? You got to be honest with people. You got to be honest with yourself. 8/13/2022, Alpine Valley 2022, the dreaded Alpine 2022 run, has its second Rushmore version. We had MoMA Dance from 8/12. We have Fluffhead from 8/13. Maybe we'll have we might have the Broken Heart Attack from 8/14 when we get there, you know.
Probably the David Bowie.
Probably the David Bowie from 8/12 once we get around to that. This version comes out of an opening 1999, goes into Fluffhead. Great performance of Fluffhead with 1999 callbacks in the peak. And then the band finds the exit ramp and moves into a jamming space that is pure 4.0 Phish jamming. So many sounds, so much rhythm, so much funk, but then great melodies and then great breakdowns. And then this finds itself in a really nice segue into Saw It Again, which for anyone paying attention, we get our reprise of the Alpine 99 version. So the band was clearly listening, clearly aware of what was happening here. I think that there's an argument for the MSG 22 version for the Dix 23 version as well. Even the Mondegreen version. I know, Meg, version. Don't get angry. It's an excellent, excellent Type 1 version. But I think that this really showcases that freedom that they found with the 7/24/99 Fluffhead. And once they got their sea legs back, they figured out how to jam, and a song like Fluffhead carried them through so much of the early 3.0 era. It's now let loose. It's now free to do whatever it wants. And you hear it in a version like this that is just stunning stuff.
I was pretty surprised listening back to this version because I think when I was listening in the moment, just so overwhelmed by the context of like this historic nod of them playing 1999, playing this, and then playing Saw It Again, sorry. And I think it was just so cute and awesome that I kind of forgot how amazing this Fluffhead was. And when I played it, it just blew my mind because it has, like you're saying, Brian, all of the crispness and the tightness, but it also has all of the 4.0 sophistication. So you've got like effects in Claude, and then you hear the crowd just go absolutely wild when they hit that 14-minute mark, and you know that they're going to jam it. And you've got the sirens as like the callbacks, and there's just so much that they're doing to incorporate what they did well in 99 and also what they do well in 4.0 in a way that is really hard to do. And it's so cool when Phish knows their history. And it was really fun to listen back and be so surprised at how awesome this version is. And I really felt like it earns its spot here for sure. And I think obviously there's like an emotional contextual argument for 3609, but playing them back to back, this has just as much kind of context and history too, in a way. And it also really showcases what you spoke about, Brian, which is, this is where Fluffhead is now. And I really think that 4.0 is a great era for Fluffhead and had to be on here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I kind of thought that I would prefer the Chula version, which Glenn Russell just mentioned in the chat. I think this is like very much a descendant of the Chula version, but the Chula version has like a nice kind of bluesy jam.
Yeah, outro. Like jazzy. Yeah, it's like super cool.
Whereas this one is just like, it's blissy, it's stretched out, it's got like, it's a little bit more dynamic, I think, than the Chula version personally. And
Yeah.
And I was at Hampton. My friend was punching me in the arm like repeatedly when they started with Fluffhead. I mean, it was like what an amazing Phish experience. But I think in terms of like if I'm recommending a Fluffhead to a friend, I'm probably not. I would tell them to listen to the first 15 seconds of the 3609 version because the crowd noise
The
is just
crowd.
over the top.
It's so
But
emotional.
I think this is the best like representative jam of the era.
And there is an argument, like the Dix is one from 9223 is so pretty and melodic. It's so beautiful. And the Mondegreen version, I will say it's absolutely amazing. Again, that like festival Fluffhead, there's something super special about it. The crowd is going crazy. Ending set 2 of that night, we all knew that we were going to have the secret set. Like it was a really great moment, and it's a beautiful, almost flawless version too. Really, really well played.
Yeah, Dix 23 is great, and it does a thing that you don't see with a lot of these jammed out versions where it completes itself. It comes back to Fluffhead. If you think
That's
about the
right.
recent jamming versions, 813 or 1023-21 goes into NICU, 813-22 goes into Saw It Again, 1229-22 goes into Your Pet Cat, 992-23 resolves itself in a really interesting way. The biggest knock on it is that it's followed by My Soul. And so we can't just by, contractual obligation, we're not allowed to include anything that, comes up right against My Soul in set listing.
It's just something we can't do.
Not allowed to.
I just wanted to shout out a couple of listeners who sent their votes in. Brian Weinstein, a fellow podcaster, Attendance Bias podcast. He had Junta. He had 11-17-90, 10-16-94, and 8-17-96. He's staying in the 90s. He also added. We have a place there where we say add any Fluffhead you think should be part of Mount Rushmore. He added 12-29-97.
That's a great version. I think I ultimately left it off because of the slop and the lack of post-peak jamming that you get from it, that I felt like it could kind of be, but I've seen it in the chat here. A couple of people have mentioned it perplexing why this wasn't on there. Perhaps we got that wrong.
Well, I think we got to stick by our guns here. I just want to say, Ev Dude has Junta 8-17-96, 3609, and 8-16-24. And overall, the
Nice.
fan vote was basically split. 8-17-96 was the top vote getter, and then Junta, and then 4-way tie between 8-1-98, 7-24-99, 9-2-23, and 3-8-09. So, sorry, 3-6-09.
3609.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad that people were cool with us doing the studio version. That makes me happy.
Well, I think we did a good job. I am proud of this Mount Rushmore, and I hope you guys are too. Do you guys have any regrets?
0. I'm super happy with this list.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned in the chat that they thought we would have gone contextually with 3609, and I think as we've all said, like contextually, it's one of the biggest things. I think that if you don't have the reinvention in 4.0 where Fluffhead becomes a regular jam vehicle, I think that is absolutely the last version on here. But we kind of have to give a nod to where history's actually gone. But yeah, man, that version, there's I think it's probably the most viewed video I've ever had on YouTube that I watch
Yeah.
is Before the Lights Drop, the purple balls around the top of the stage, or the top of the arena, that song, the like bump 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 bump, and then like the lights drop and you can just hear people crying, and the band comes on stage and they all look so young now. They're like fucking 45 years old. Like they're just like little dudes. Like Mike has so much hair and Trey's hair is all bright red still, and they look so happy and so nervous. And I got to imagine the nerves in that moment were so intense for those guys because they're about to deliver something that they haven't played in 10 years. And it's an amazing version that I still remember my brother texting me, all caps, Fluffhead, like 50 times in a row. God, just amazing stuff.
That's pretty great. Great experience. Well, I still think I think these 4 versions in terms of representing Fluffhead are what should be there. So I'm sticking by it. Send us voicemails and emails and whatever else you want. Tell us what you think. Give us reviews. And by the time this is released, you should be able to vote on your favorite versions of Wave of Hope if you go to osirispod.com/Rushmore. So check that out. And I think that's everything. If you're listening to this on the audio version, hop over to the library card feed because we are going to talk about The Shining ×2 in just a minute. And if you're watching on the stream, just hang out here. We'll probably like put up remember the Simpsons thing where they had the what did it say? Technical difficulties with the guy with the camera, like with the drunk guy with the camera. So we'll probably do that. But we're gonna stay on here and we're gonna keep talking.
Just Brian.
I don't know why I'm the only person on here. This is there
Brian.
we go.
There we go.
We
We're
got
back
back to normal.
We have rebranded. Okay. We'll see you guys next week for Wave of Hope and a conversation with the guys from Music on the Mountain and Brian from Dogs in a Pile. Go to osirispod.com/Rushmore to vote on your favorite versions of Wave of Hope. Nope, I'm not going to sing anything, but we're gonna move on to library card. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye everyone.
Okay, so here, why don't we do this? Watch this. I got something great for you guys.
I can't wait.
Actually, I don't know how to do it. I was gonna do a countdown. How do you do the countdown? Oh, here we go.
Oh,
you guys ready?
You got it.
I got it. Okay. I wonder if we can do this. Do you think we can do it in 1 minute? Let's do this. Let's do this 2-minute timer. Here we go. See you guys in a minute. All right. I think we're coming back. What happens when the countdown ends? We just show back up. Look at that. We're so ready.
Welcome back, book nerds.
And welcome back, film nerds. This is a library card and blockbuster card crossover episode. I'm Brian Brinkman. I'm joined as always by Megan and RJ, two people who have given the chance to spend 6 months in solitude with nothing but time to write, would absolutely jump at it, even if it meant they had to hack their families to death with an axe. Megan and RJ, how are you guys doing here today?
I mean, the first part of that sounded great. The second part, not so much. But yeah, I think, RJ and I, a lot of our conversations have to do with wishing we had more time to write. So we can definitely relate to that.
Hey, I mean, they survive.
They do.
Sorry, spoiler alert.
And it's character building too. You know, I think Wendy
Yes.
really, really learns a lot about herself and her capabilities after that
So true.
experience.
So
I
true.
mean,
You
Danny
know,
was having out of body experiences for
Yeah.
the majority of the story. So you have to imagine this was character building and brought him back to reality.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't want to go off the rails already, but so this is the second time I've read The Shining, and I totally missed the fact that there was a sequel called Doctor Sleep that came out like 15 years
Yeah,
later.
I didn't know that either until this.
I don't
And
know why I didn't know that, but I didn't. So
well, apparently King in some forum asked people what they would rather hear, like a sequel to The Shining or another book, and people wanted a sequel to The Shining, so he wrote one. But we didn't hear much about it, so it must not be good.
yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. Brian, please proceed.
Well, go ahead, Meg. This
Yeah,
is Library Card and Blockbuster Card. We
It's
got both
both.
of us working today. 2 hosts.
Two
And it's
hosts, you know,
HF
we're gonna
Pod.
figure it out. It's
And
also
it's still
HF
HF
Pod.
So let's just all
It's
talk
so
at the same time.
confusing. It's just loose, but it's exciting because we're for the first time going to be talking about a book and a movie. So today we're going to talk about the 1977 novel The Shining by Stephen King and the 1980 film by Stanley Kubrick. So we're going to start by discussing the book, and then we're going to take a look at how the film approaches the themes and how it differs from and complements the novel. So I'm going to give a brief summary and then we're going to dive in. So The Shining was published, as I said, in 1977, and it was King's third novel and his first in hardcover. This book really cemented King's preeminence in the American horror genre. And in the novel, Jack Torrance is a struggling writer and a recovering alcoholic who accepts a job as the winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel in Colorado. He is escaping Vermont, where he has lost his teaching job in disgrace. And he brings his young son, Danny, and his wife, Wendy, with him to the Overlook for the winter season. The Overlook has been the site of murders and other nefarious behavior throughout its history, and a previous winter caretaker who lost his mind and killed his family. So Jack's son, Danny, possesses the shine and has psychic abilities that enable him to see all of the horror that has happened within the Overlook, and that the Overlook wants to gain control of those powers by convincing Jack to murder Wendy and Danny. A winter storm makes the family captive, and the forces and spirits inside the Overlook make Jack lose his mind and try to kill Wendy. And they are assisted, Wendy and Danny, by the cook, who returns because he also has the shine and has been summoned by Danny telepathically. So he helps Wendy and Danny escape the Overlook before it blows up. This was my first time reading Stephen King. I know both of you read a lot of Stephen King. I felt crazy that it was my first Stephen King, but I don't read horror. I don't read suspense really, or a lot of thrillers. I'm also admittedly kind of a snob. I read mainly pretty highbrow contemporary fiction or classics, and I avoid a lot of commercial fiction. And I read this in a really interesting way. At first, I was like, oh, I'm not feeling the way I feel when I usually read. I'm not inspired to write poetry the way that I am when I usually read fiction. But then I just got so hooked and I could not put this book down. The last 100 pages of this book are like the steep drop of a roller coaster where you have all that potential energy that's built up and you just fly downhill. And I was blown away by King's pace and how effortlessly he writes. It was a real joy to read him. And I think, RJ, you said this before we read it, that it would be like the fastest, whatever, how many hundreds of pages of books this is, but it's pretty big. And I read it so fast and I really loved it. And I think what was interesting to me was reading a little bit more about King and why he wrote this book. And he has called this book a confession. And to me, it feels like he's confessing the frustrations of young children, the pressure of being a parent, the pressure of being a provider, and the challenges of being an artist and the difficulties of living a creative life while also being a partner and a provider and a parent. And I was thinking about the three of us, and we're all creatives, we're all parents. So I want to ask both of you for your overall takeaways of the book. And then also, do you think this book hits harder or differently or more impactful if you are a parent and you understand what it's like to have a family and what that weight feels like? So Brian, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I mean, I found myself relating to this book in a way that did not expect to going in. I I read King for the first time about a decade ago, and I kind of had a similar experience to you, where his name was everywhere, his books were everywhere. Wasn't really a horror guy, and someone was like, "No, you just have to dive in and read him. He's such a great writer." And I picked up The Dead Zone while I was traveling and I read it. And I had a very similar experience reading that book to what I had here, where the way that King writes is both really approachable, but he takes a lot of risks with form in a way that I don't think you anticipate with bestseller authors, commercial authors in this sort of manner. He has such a skill for kind of just needling his way into your brain, and you start to like think in the way that he writes, and you start to really just like see these fully formed three-dimensional figures in the way that he writes. And I think like there's almost a like King's peak as a novelist in the late 20th century kind of aligns with the last like true peak of like mass reading culture in America in a
Mm.
way that I think is really attractive, and also I wish we could get back to. It's also kind of in the same way that like you could make certain movies in the 80s and 90s, for 20-30 million dollars, and expect, most of that to be made back. And these were movies that were like not events, they were just stories that people were going to see. And I think that King writes in that sort of manner where you're not going to be challenged in the way that we've talked about in some of the books that we've discussed, but like sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just need a guy who has like a real keen sense of building characters, building plot, building suspense, and then filling in the blanks with really relatable stuff. So, from your second part of your question, like from a parental standpoint, I got to imagine this is one of the biggest books of the last 50 years for good reason, because I think everybody, across the spectrum has read it. But I do think it speaks in a way to the parental experience, like you talked about, the level of responsibility, the level of expectation as a provider, but also that like kind of needling anger at your partner, at your kids, for what they need from you that takes you away from who you are and who you're trying to grow towards. And this sense of like, as creative types who always kind of have our projects going on, who have various hobbies and find themselves searching for ways to be fully immersed in what their creative path is, but always having job, grocery shopping, putting kids down, all these parental things that come up, and those things ripping you away from like, oh, this is the moment where I actually got it. I figured out how to say what I'm trying to say. And you're trying to do that, but you have all these other responsibilities. That level of anger that's clouded in regret and also clouded in like a little bit of shame is kind of fascinating to me, and is something I definitely relate to. And I found made the character of Jack so empathetic from a novel standpoint that I found myself viewing this more of like a tragedy versus a horror
Mm.
novel, in the way that we'll talk about the differences if we get into the film. Whereas that feels much more like a horror flick. This feels much
Yeah.
more of like a tragic, empathetic figure who is an everyman, who is failing not necessarily because he's evil or because he can't do things, but because life is so omnipresent.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to like kind of answer what you asked, Megan, but also to do a quick Brian Brinkman style diversion of the best 20 Stephen King books. I've read probably 20 of his books, and I think I read almost all of them between ages 12 and 17, so I think like rereading this, it's less impactful than it was the first time. And partially that's because when I read all these books, it was really like an experience of storytelling as opposed to writing, and I think that's like a big difference.
Yeah.
like, I don't think he's a great writer, you know, I just think he's like the best storyteller. And I think those are obviously different things. And, you know, like going back to some of these earlier, I forgot that this was the second one. Still think this is probably like the best book to recommend someone start with. But, you know, books like Carrie or It, Cujo, Needful Things, Pet Cemetery, Misery. I mean, these are books that are just like amazing. You guys know, of course, 11/22/63, which is sort of a different book, but about like, you know, an alternative reality if JFK had not been assassinated. Different Seasons, which of course has 3 stories out of 4 that were made into huge movies, including Shawshank and Stand By Me, and what's the other one? Well, Apt Pupil was made into a movie, which I don't think was very good, but the story itself was fucking outrageous. So anyway, I've read like a lot of Stephen King, but I think that as an adult reading it, and as like a writer and a reader, it's just a different experience. It's much more of like,
Mhm.
okay, we're going on the ride with him, and you know, it's not gonna like make me inspired to change the way that I think about prose or anything like that, but it definitely makes me think about like, how do you keep people engaged from page 1 and like keep it moving in a way that is really easy to read, right? But also not, to me, not like a something you pick up on the newsstand at a supermarket for a beach read. You know, there's like
Yeah.
it's a step above that, but it also is like, it's just about storytelling, and I don't know if there's anyone better than him at that.
Yeah, I think what's
Yeah,
interesting too about what both of you are saying is that his books can kind of be read on multiple levels. Like I know so many people that read his books when they were really young. Like you're saying like 12 to 17. And this is a book about a man losing his mind and going crazy because of his responsibilities. But then that can be viewed on many levels.
yeah, and I think I think to RJ's point, you can read this as just like a very enjoyable read that you're not
Like a
trying to
horror
study the
book.
text, like a horror book.
Yeah.
But whereas like a kind of like the on that same level of success and mass sales, there are a lot of books. Dan Brown writes a lot of really successful books that when you read, you're like, this dialogue just does not sound like a way people actually talk. There's way too many loose ends that are just being left here. There's way too many unbelievable turns that we're doing just so that you turn the chapter from chapter 13 to chapter 14. Stephen King, like his dialogue is some of my favorite part of his writing and his descriptions of people. It is almost I think that like, you know, if you're going to make a comparison to a director, you know, from a film standpoint, it's like Spielberg. Like Spielberg movies
Yeah.
go down easy, but then they also have these like really dark, really intense themes that you kind of have to wrestle with after you've watched the movie. And when you go back and you can study Steven Spielberg movies, there are so many layers and so much depth there that it's a true art, even though it's, you know, this may not be the best comparison, but it's like, you know, listening to the Beatles where they sold everything. They had all these number 1 hits, but then within those songs, what they're doing within the pop structure is so deeply impressive.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I want to make sure we talk about that I think really differs from the movie is I want to talk about Jack's character because you mentioned this at the beginning, Brian, talking about him being kind of the everyman. And I think it's pretty transgressive what King was writing about. If you think about when this book came out in the late 70s, he's talking about, you know, generational domestic violence and how that influences the person that is inflicting it. And I think it's so fascinating because you really get a deep understanding of Jack's father and how that influenced Jack and who Jack became as a father and who he wants to be and who he is and the challenge when those two aren't aligning. And I think that that's really powerful in the book. And it's not something that was talked about a lot in the 70s. And I think it's really cool that he was writing this super popular book about some really dark things and really getting at what has been a through line for masculinity and and men throughout a long period of time, and how men were viewed and how they were expected to behave within their families. I am curious to hear what both of your thoughts are about that, but I think it's a real difference from the movie. And to me, the kind of linchpin as to what the massive difference is as to what the point of the movie is and what the point of the book is. And to me, this is kind of what the book is really about. And I think Kubrick was doing something much different in his movie. And I just want to make sure we really get deep into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so much of his book, like his first book, published book, was Carrie, which is about, basically like a girl who has no friends, who goes to the prom and um, takes revenge on like her high school classmates. But she also comes from like an abusive household. Like the abusive household thing is like definitely a theme, as is like substance abuse and, you know, challenges with that. I mean, it's really interesting that this was written like 10 years before he got sober. So clearly this was like, confession in terms of him being, it's very much like partially at least autobiographical or in some way, but like
Yeah.
a lot of these books like Needful Things or It or some of the more like horror kind of themed, a lot of it is about psychological, physical, emotional trauma and abuse, which I think is why there are these deeper interpretations beyond just like, there are ghosts coming out of the graveyard to chase people. It's like, and it's really weird and fucked up how he writes about, like the dad, like Jack's dad. It's like, it's scary, but the scary parts are so realistic and commonplace that it makes it scarier, right? When it's like,
Yeah.
it's all very believable.
The glasses and the mashed potatoes, like
Yeah,
his mom's
yeah,
glasses, like that's absolutely terrifying.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's the thing that makes him a really powerful writer, is the fact that obviously there's a supernatural element. Obviously, some of these books have like real monsters, but I think that a large theme of like a through line for King is what happens in the quieter places in America within the family structure that can horrify you, and that can really terrify you and make you into someone that you necessarily are not. I think that as we get into the like film versus book conversation, there could be an entire movie about just the first half of The Shining, of the book.
Oh, yeah.
um you know um And I think this was also made into a mini series, which explores a bit further Jack from a background standpoint. But it seems to me, in reading as much as I have about Kubrick and about The Shining, the film versus the novel, King was trying to telegraph his own experiences with alcoholism as a creative type with a family to support. Whereas Kubrick was really fascinated with where you can showcase a person breaking and what that ultimately looks like in real time. And so as a result, structurally, you get this book that is about 250 pages of background empathy building with Jack Torrance, who is, as you mentioned at the top, Meg, someone who is coming from a relatively failed background. However, he has had stories published in Esquire. He's a relatively known up and coming novelist who clearly has an alcohol issue, clearly has domestic violence issues in his past. There's a well-known attack on Danny that is addressed in both the movie and the film. The film doesn't really go into why he left the school in Vermont. There's a student there that he assaulted, and you go into that and what actually led to the assault. You actually go through that in kind of a memory. But then also when they get to the hotel, Jack, who is in the midst of trying to finish a play that is going to be a huge opportunity for him, discovers this whole backlog of history to the Overlook Hotel. And like, I think any of us becomes obsessed with it. And that becomes like, this is
Yeah.
the problem with writing, is you sit down at your computer and you're like, I actually wonder if, there's information on specific battles in the 30 Years' War. And then you find yourself over the next 4 hours in front of your computer where you're supposed to be writing, but actually like deep diving past history. And that's what your focus is now, not the story you're trying to tell. And so he goes through this challenge that is so relatable of, I'm so fascinated by this information I'm getting. I have to turn this into my new project, which leads to blowback, which leads to him almost losing his job at that point in time, which is a huge part of the telling of the story during the first half of the novel, where you realize like this guy is so human and I relate to his problems. And this makes the breaking point that's looming that much more terrifying. And to me, that part of the book was so much more frightening than the final third of the book, because you know where this is going, you know where this is leading to, but you're seeing someone who's on edge of potentially using these 6 months in the most valuable way possible, or someone who is using these 6 months to potentially, destroy their life.
Yeah, and can I just go can I just say a little bit more about like the Jack kind of character, especially with
Please.
the background,
Please
because
do.
I think he's not like Stephen King isn't really known for his exploration of like characters, I think it's more like plot and story. But for me reading this the second time, like it's interesting how well he splices in these little things, like how he consistently kind of thinks his son might be deceiving him, going back to how his own dad was and how he's sort of becoming his dad, but like it doesn't do it in like a hackneyed way at all. It's like really believable and smart, and he's not even like realizing that he's sort of starting to feel about his son the way his dad felt about him. And it's so interesting how well he does that, like interior battle kind of Jack, which like you said, Brian, makes him into a much more compelling character. And I've seen the movie a couple times, maybe two or three, maybe more, and I think it's an amazing movie. But like I said this to you guys via text, it was like in the movie, it's like he sits down at his typewriter and he's like typing, and then like the next scene he's like going crazy, and you're like, what happened? Like
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
and there's so much less time obviously to like develop things, but it's amazing how that contrast is. And I wonder if that's part of the reason why Stephen King didn't like the movie. Like I wonder
Yeah.
if it's that part
Yeah.
that you're talking about,
Yeah.
like
Well,
Jack.
he wrote a script and Kubrick rejected it.
But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it because of the one-dimensional nature of Jack in the movie versus the like? Do you think that is a thing that he reacted strongly to, or
Yeah.
do you think there's like a lot of other issues too?
No, that's it. He watched a screening of the movie and was like, "What did you do to Jack? You just turned him into a monster."
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And I think
Yeah.
like kind of transitioning there, because we're talking about the most successful, perhaps the most successful writer of the 20th century, and arguably the greatest director of the 20th century, who by the late 1970s was living in relative isolation in England and had a family, two teenage daughters. He'd been married for almost 20 years at this point in time. Um, was known for having final cut and complete control over his projects, had the ability to keep a tight lid and a tight wrap on his projects. His creative process was such that he would throw everything he had into a project, would dabble a little bit. The Napoleon Project was always something he was working on. His attempts to adapt Trom Novella, which he would not adapt until his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, were constantly being tinkered with. He always wanted to make a Holocaust film and was so close to making it until Schindler's List came out. And then he realized, well, I can't have another one of these to compete with this. He was always he had this ability to throw himself so entirely into a project that allowed him to get things out of cinematography, music, actors, in a way that feels almost like how a really great writer approaches a book, where they come out with a book 500 to 1,000 pages every 8 to 10 years type of thing where you kind of forget about them. And then lo and behold, almost how like Tom Wolfe was in the late 20th century, where the books were such an event. That's how Kubrick films were. And where he found himself in the late 70s, he hadn't really made many commercially successful films. They were heavily lauded. They were heavily, celebrated by film critics and by the movie going community. But 2001, Clockwork Orange wasn't able to be shown in England until after he passed away. Barry Lyndon was a massive box office failure, and he found himself in the late 70s at this point in time where he had some pressure from Warner Brothers that if you're going to have all this control, you have to deliver a hit. And at this point in time, he became pretty obsessed with the idea of horror and obsessed with the idea of familial horror, what happens within the four walls of a home and how life and expectations can mess people up. And he read a ton of books, went through a ton of ideas, and then read The Shining in like a weekend and was like, this is it. And we talked about this in our last Blockbuster Card episode on One Battle After Another. Paul Thomas Anderson talks about how it's really hard to make a film about a book that you love because you're just going to destroy the book to make the film. You can't do everything. Certain aspects of this book, all the time it would take to have all these scenes that showcase Jack as he's slowly, in a nuanced manner, losing his mind, isn't necessarily possible in a movie that's already 2.5 hours long. Things like the hedge animals in the book, not really capable of being replicated in 1970s any sort of computer generation like that would have looked ridiculous. That's not necessarily something Kubrick is going to do. So he made a number of changes. And basically, like, as I read the book and as I watched the movie, my take is that the book is a unbelievable, like, look at a parent kind of losing their sense of self and their sense of foundation, and over time slowly withering away until they crack. Whereas the movie, to me, is this just expert examination of what true horror feels like on a minute by minute basis, where you combine the tracking shots with this new Steadicam technology that Kubrick was using for the first time, the labyrinth of the hotel and the maze, the music, the score that is ever present, and then just the rage that you see out of Jack from kind of the moment that he's watching Wendy and Danny play outside in the snow and he's in that black turtleneck sweater and his hair's all messed up and he's just like looking out the window like, and you just realize like, oh my God, this guy is cracking, to like, he's cracked. And that is the last hour of the film is literally just him cracking it. So you get these two very different perspectives. Do you lose something in the film of the backstory? In a way, yes, but that intensity kind of almost overwhelms you in the same sort of way that the start of the book overwhelms you.
Yeah, I was thinking last night I watched the movie again, and I was thinking how the movie is like a moving painting. The symmetry that he uses, he employs like this really, really strict symmetry. Almost all of his shots are exactly symmetrical and they're so vibrant and everything seems to be in its perfect spot, which gives this sense of order and discipline and stability. And then you see someone in the middle, like the actors usually right down the middle, losing their mind or being chased, or you see Shelley Duvall's amazing, face that's just so expressive. Nicholson and Duvall, like, I would watch their faces in every movie. They're two of the most expressive actors that have ever lived. I believe everything they do. They commit so hard, and I'm so here for them. But I think that the way that he visually represents everything in that movie is kind of what his intention is, and the story is less important. And I think that the things that make the book so amazing, Jack's backstory, I also think the way that King, what you were speaking about, RJ, the way that King's able to bring the interiority of how Jack's losing his mind into the hotel, right? All of those things, like the hotel starts to represent all of their fears and all of the things that they're scared of or worried about. And the hotel becomes alive with those things. It's like haunted by them in a way, which I found amazing. And I think it's missing from the book or the movie. Like the movie is not about the hotel being haunted, like the hotel itself, they're not attacking you like in the book, but instead it's all in Jack's mind. And it makes it feel more claustrophobic. And I was so funny because in both the book and the movie, I kept feeling like I wasn't going to be that scared because I've seen the movie like 3 times. When reading the book, I knew the movie, so I'm like, I'm not gonna be scared. And both of them, I was absolutely horrified because they're both masters at what they do. And I think that the way that Kubrick uses color and music and the way the symmetry I mentioned, all 3 of those, to me, it's much more painterly and almost a different art form. Even it's hard to even compare them to writing because writing is so it's so much different because writing lives inside your mind. And so you're the one creating that. And it's kind of the opposite with Kubrick. He's giving you the palette and you are just experiencing it in a way that it's almost like different, completely different. Obviously, they're different mediums, but it felt almost hard to compare them in a way. I don't know if you had that experience, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think because I watched and read them in such close succession, it was hard to separate. But I do think the score and the cinematography are really amazing. I think the pacing is super fast, and it does, like you said, Brian, it's sort of like the last hour is just like him cracking. But one of the interesting things about the book that you were just touching on, Megan, is like Jack didn't want to leave the hotel. Something was like pulling him back toward it. And it's sort of like as a writing storytelling device, it's kind of like the bee sting when there's like many moments when you're like, if you just like left now, everything would be fine. Like you don't have to like, don't you think if you just all went into town, like it would be way better off to go to Sidewinder and like your troubles would be over. But the movie is so fast paced that there's no space for that because there's no, it's shorter, but it's also like there's not enough time for you to be like, why are they doing what they're doing? Because it is like a fast-paced horror movie,
But I almost think that that's what's funny. Sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah.
that's what's so funny about the book is that Jack he does that to himself in the same way that remember when they're talking about the issue with the school and the kid he assaulted? At first he's like having this argument with the kid and the kid's accusing him of moving up the time for his debate clock because he's stuttering. And Jack's like refuses that he did it. And then it kind of slowly becomes revealed that he actually did. And so you find out he's actually done all these things that he claims that he didn't do and that he claims aren't his fault. And it's kind of like he's sabotaging himself. And he does that in the book too, so many times. And it's like almost like that's like the story is that he thinks he's a victim, but he's instigating so many of these problems. But I think you're right. In the movie, you don't even think about that.
Well, and I think like in the book, sorry, Brian, I just want to ask I was sort of like, I wonder if that's up for interpretation or not, because the part you said about the timer, only because as the book goes on, his dreams and his reality and the play and what's happening in the hotel all become like so intertwined that it's sort of like what he knows as his own reality, past, present, are like confusing.
I thought he did because he was like, I did, but it was only because you were studying. It was to help you.
Okay,
and
yeah.
It's true. Maybe that was like his reality was being blurred. I'm not sure. Brian, did you think that he admitted to that in a way?
I mean, I think I think it's so complicated because you're talking about someone who's clearly mentally unstable, is clearly going through alcohol addiction,
Right.
is clearly like the pressure of life is on them. Because you talk. This is one of my favorite parts of the book, and I felt that they include it in the movie, but the way that they included it in the movie, it kind of feels this like diversion that unless you have read the book, you don't really recognize, which makes me think like they're just two completely different things, which is this debate of should we just leave for Danny's well-being? But the debate in Jack's mind is don't you, and he says this to Wendy in such a great way, like the delivery in the movie in this is actually great. Like, don't you understand my responsibilities?
Yeah.
Don't you understand that they have asked me to take care of this hotel? And that's a theme that you return to over and over and over again. And like, if you've ever gone through like varying levels of like, personal, financial, health related crises that like are on top of just like working and like day-to-day living, this sense of like endless weight on your shoulders that you feel um is so all consuming that like you can make really illogical decisions that you have justified have logic behind them. And I think that like this sense of, yeah, of course I care about my kid and his well-being, but like it's a 5-year-old who is, prone to making having an imagination and making things up. And like, why are we going to make this decision that is going to impact our family's finances and our potential future for him potentially making something up? If we leave here and we abandon our responsibilities, like we're done. He says at one point, I'm going to be shoveling driveways and cleaning
Hmm.
off windshields. Like that's all I'm going to have. And you really get this sense. Like at one point they go through like the family finances and he has like something like $80 to his name. So in 2025 money, like maybe he has like 5 grand in a bank account, and like that's
Right.
money that could like, you pay your freaking mortgage, a couple groceries, like you're gone. Like that money's gone. So you really realize like how closely they're living to true poverty, but also how close and how what an opportunity Jack has to fix everything right now, reinvent himself, and in a year perhaps this play sells and suddenly they're back in a good situation and he can focus on himself, and now we can take care of Danny. And so like those that is all a part of the book. That is, it's why a book can be so essential, is like you can dive into that page after page after page, that debate and that back and forth. Whereas in the movie, you kind of have to accept from moment one that this is all going to end really badly, because listen to the music as we're driving up the road to the Overlook
Oh,
Hotel.
I love
Um,
that intro. God, one of the best movie intros of all time.
yeah, I mean, that dude, like Kubrick uses this fusion of synthesizers and classical music in a way that became more normalized in film, but like he was kind of the first person to really do it. And it's its own unique sound. You hear it throughout 2001, you hear it in Clockwork Orange, you hear it here, you hear it in Eyes Wide Shut. This sense of like the modern with the classical, and this idea that there was a period where, during the Enlightenment, where humans essentially had kind of wisdom passed down to them in a manner that uh, they were able to clearly communicate on the human experience. And the further and further we get into the modern world, the further we get away from that. But he fuses this in such a fascinating way that like it's all over this movie. Um, I guess like uh, watching the movie, I had a slight nagging issue with the fact that this performance I've long loved suddenly seems slightly one-dimensional and slightly just
Yeah.
monstrous.
Like exaggerated and like a little bit, you can't really like
I like.
justify what he's doing,
I
right?
also I laughed I
Yeah.
laughed several times watching Jack Nicholson's facial expressions, because they're like really great, but it's also like it's so over the top that it's just like
Yeah.
I don't remember thinking of it as like comedic before, but now it like looks it's just, I mean, it's funny because his facial expressions are so outrageous.
I think part of the problem, and this is, I might get major blowback for this, but whatever. I mean, Jack Nicholson, the guy's won 3 Academy Awards. Like, it's really difficult to actually argue against him. But I have a really hard time when I watch Jack Nicholson movies not knowing that, or not thinking, well, that's Jack Nicholson. And I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah,
something
he's
like
gotten bigger than his characters. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no matter what it is, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that's Jack
Yeah.
Nicholson raising a ruckus in a mental institution. The Shining, this is Jack Nicholson like being Jack Nicholson like extra. Even like his more modern movies like About Schmidt, As Good as It Gets, what was the one I watched earlier this year with Diane Keaton? I'm blanking on it. Something's Got to Give. Like, it's Jack Nicholson as a eligible elderly bachelor, and I think that like our modern, like the actor closest aligned to Jack Nicholson today is Leonardo DiCaprio. And while you're watching Leonardo DiCaprio play these characters, I think Leonardo DiCaprio, at least to my eyes, maybe this is totally biased because it's the modern era and I'm watching modern movies, but I feel like he disappears into these roles in a way that like Jack Nicholson doesn't as much. You still kind of know this is Jack Nicholson doing this. And so you
Yeah.
get this great performance that really highlights what horror feels like, but you do lose a little bit of that every man, any father could be in this position.
Yeah, and I mean, he wasn't nominated for this role, and I think also it's hard to watch The Shining now. It's so memorialized. Like, this is gotta be one of the most, like, famous, iconic movies, and so you know what's coming, you know his face in there. Like, there's so many lines from here that are just, like, all that stuff is just so it's such a part of our culture now that it's hard almost to watch it now and not feel removed from it in some way, but he he's not a chameleon. He's never been a chameleon actor.
Yeah.
I think he's famous and a genius for what he does, which is committing 1000% and for having such an expressive face, for being both really good looking, but also not gorgeous. Like, he's interesting, like, especially in The Shining, like, he's not gorgeously attractive like a Robert Redford, or he's not like that, but he's also really enjoyable to watch on screen, and charming in a way that only movie stars are. And so there's something about him um, that is undeniable, I think. But I totally agree. I was frustrated with how unrealistic his character is. I mean, it's like, I think if you went a little bit more in the movie about how important this job is for him, and made Danny less weird and made Wendy less annoying, because I think all three of them are playing too much in that lane, and maybe that's by design, but like, Danny in the book is so sympathetic. He's just this precocious kid with this incredible gift and trying his best, and Danny in the movie is just straight up weird.
The first time you
And
see him, you're like, that kid has got some
it's
demons.
weird. And also,
Yeah.
like, Kubrick, by doing Tony in his finger, is doing a
Yeah.
visual aid, but it really lessens the impact of what it's like to have this person inside your mind. Like, I think that there's so much depth to what King's doing in the book that has to go out of the movie, or it did go out of the movie. And I mean, Wendy is she's so submissive and fairly annoying in the movie, but I don't find her that way in the book. Like,
Yeah.
she's submissive, but only in the way that probably most women were in the 70s.
Well, I also
Yeah.
think like those are the trade-offs you have to make when you're like trying to make a movie from a really long and complicated book, right? Like, you
Yeah.
can't. There's just some things you can't do. Like the Tony thing is like, I mean, today we would have like computer generated imaginary friend kind of stuff, right, or something. But
Like,
right
in his
now
head,
it's like,
yeah.
it's like suddenly he's just using his finger in a different voice. It's just like bizarre. But
Well, a couple things on that. Well,
Yeah.
first, do you know two actors who were considered for the role before he ultimately decided on Nicholson?
No, who?
Woody Allen
wow.
Wow. How
and
young was he then? Wow, that's fascinating.
it was like right after he made Annie Hall. He was probably 30s at
Yeah.
that point. So he was right as
With Shelley Duvall, right? Or
with
wait,
Shelley
she was
Duvall.
in it. She was in Annie Hall, right?
I believe she plays I think
But
she
she's
has,
not. She's not the main person. But I think she was in
No,
it.
it's Diane
No, that's
Keaton.
Diane Keaton.
Right.
And then Robert De Niro. And Robert De Niro has since said that it is the scariest movie he's ever watched, and he doesn't think he could have acted in it. And I don't really think that like do your best Robert De Niro impression, like
No,
him
I'm not seeing that.
him in that role
I'm
doesn't
not.
really work.
I mean, after Taxi Driver and King of Comedy,
yeah, it's a fair
I
point. That's a
mean,
fair point.
Taxi
like,
Driver is
he
pretty
kinda-
scary. Yeah.
He's
Mhm.
like
Yeah, and King
pretty
of Comedy, he kind of plays that type of character. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
crazy.
Shelley Duvall is obviously like a very, very different take on like the wife in the book. You get this impression is like he's very lucky to have gotten this woman who he's very attracted to. And in the movie, Kubrick specifically said that he cast Shelley Duvall because you want, this is Kubrick's words, these are not mine. You want a woman that even the audience will agree halfway through the movie that they kind of want to kill too. And she has that
Fascinating.
like
Mhm.
mousy, like she's always a little too anxious and she's like asking one too many questions and she's like trying a little too hard to be like the nice, supportive wife to this writer who's trying to figure things out. He's just like, can you just leave me alone so I can do my work? And you're just like, yeah, get the fuck out of the room, Shelley. What are you doing here? Like, why are you asking if he wants a sandwich right now?
And she's like, "Give me a sandwich and maybe I'll just read what you wrote." It's like, no, it's not the thing to say. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think that's true. I also don't know if anybody would have been able to give the eyes that Shelley Duvall gives in those final scenes. And I mean, that scene when she's being chased and she's got the knife and into the bathroom. It's just, she does it like nobody else.
Yeah, and I think Jack Nicholson does an amazing job. I mean, think about the Jack Nicholson, like just think about his lines in this, like the Wendy, I'm home line, and then the Here's Johnny line, obviously. But he has so many. And then like someone in the chat mentioned the Joker, which he also like he was the Joker. Like think about how many lines
Yeah.
he has from the Joker, which are as the Joker, which are just like iconic. Like he has so many iconic lines. And Easy Rider too. He's like he might be like the master of iconic lines. He might have more iconic lines than anyone. He's got a lot.
That's so true. His delivery is always like absolutely spot on.
Yeah, ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
Just two quick notes. Shelley Duvall was, I don't know if it was agreed upon by Jack and Stanley, but the two of them treated her like shit throughout the entire filming of the movie behind
Okay,
the
that's
scenes.
so fucking sexist in 70s. I absolutely hate
It
that. I
is.
just have to tell you, it's really gross and demeaning.
The reason for it was they wanted her to project truly authentic horror.
I get
and
that, but she's an
truly authentic-
actress. She's not a child.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining what happened. They felt as though if they kept her on edge where she was never comfortable on set, that she would deliver a truly incredible performance for the ages. And I think she does. And whether or not that is because of the setting, she has spoken in interviews since about how it was one of the more remarkable movies she ever made, and that she felt like Stanley got things out of her that no other director could have. He had his ways that I don't think would really last in 2020's film culture, probably for the best. But it is an interesting side note to this that they looked at Jack, having come off of that Oscar win for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, was essentially looked at as though he could do anything. So there was a lot of trust in his ability to carry this film. I think that they looked at Shelley, who was not as well renowned of an actress, still very talented, and said, we have to like really make sure that she's in this role. And that is part of it. They also
That's definitely arguable. I mean, she's like a huge Altman muse. So I
Yes.
get it, but I also think that like that stuff went on for so much longer past the 70s. Like my girlfriend and I, who I went to acting school with, we were just talking about our acting teacher and we were like sharing all these stories that we'd never told each other. And we were like, that just wouldn't fly now. And that was in the 90s, this stuff just, it happened and happens.
Apparently we do this on our podcast where we only criticize Megan's draft picks to make her a better drafter. So, it's still happening in the entertainment.
So true.
Oh my God. Yeah. All of us women, we just need you men to make us better.
No, it's true though.
We're so lucky.
We're so, Megan is so traumatized by having to do these drafts that she's overcome adversity and somehow she's able to do it despite all the abuse and all the mental and anguish that she's gone through. It's just,
thank God I have all these men around me
incredible.
to like encourage me and push me, because otherwise I'd just be wasting away and not, living up to my potential.
Hey, I mean, we're not the ones who talk about how hard it is for you to draft on every draft. To be fair,
No,
you're the one who
I've
does that.
never once said that. I think it's.
I think we are.
I think she does
We're
a
like
brilliant job of stealing other people's
feel like
favorite stuff, and like winning drafts. It's amazing.
we are like
Mhm.
the literal the definition of empowerment and support.
It's
And
true.
you're like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do it, guys." And we're like, "You already won. We didn't even start yet."
12 hours before every draft, Meg's like, I don't know if I can do it. And like, I write like a long supportive text of like, hey, I really think that you are underestimating your knowledge of this band and that you should really have a little bit more confidence here.
It's
And,
true.
maybe that's what does it. Maybe it's my reassurances. I don't know.
It is. It's both
I
of
think
your
it is.
encouragement. That's the only reason I do well.
The other just really
Yeah, go ahead.
one just quick note.
Yeah.
Danny was not told he was the boy who plays Danny, who actually I think is named Danny Lloyd, was told he was not told he was making a horror film, and he was treated with care and
Crazy.
compassion whenever he wasn't in front of the camera. I said earlier, they utilized this new technology for Steadicam, which allowed them to go do all those crazy tracking shots through the hotel. They would give him rides on that while they were making scenes as like kind of like we're having fun, we're taking you around the hotel. And the whole point, similar to Shelley Duvall, was when he saw a truly horrifying image, they wanted that like true horror on his face, which is probably part of the reason why that actor didn't make many movies beyond the age of 5.
He's traumatized.
That's pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Oh my
It's
God.
pretty wild.
The scenes, I will think one thing that I love of his scenes I love that Kubrick added him like riding the bike through the hallways.
Yeah.
I think that's such a genius move because you have that sense of like motion through, but you're following him. So you're seeing it from his short perspective. And I just absolutely love that addition.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Can we talk about the boiler as like a as a
Yeah.
symbol? We don't hear from the boiler at all in
There's one
in
scene in the movie.
There's one scene, but it's not a I mean, it's kind of a metaphor obviously in the book. It's kind of like a red flag kind of thing, like it plays an important role in the book, of course, and then it doesn't in the movie, which I think is interesting. And you could see how it could have played a role in the movie, but maybe the ending of the movie is just as convincing and maybe even more kind of unique than if the whole hotel had blown up. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Can I be honest about something?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Let's see your face. Yeah, you look like you have a real strong feeling about it.
I kind of hate the ending of both the book and the movie.
Wow.
The boiler symbolism, obviously, I get that. But then the epilogue to the book, where everything is kind of being rebuilt and okay with, Danny's recovering. I kind of just wish we had ended with the boiler.
Yeah.
I think I prefer that as the ending versus what ultimately happens. It makes sense with the way that the movie was going, but I think that there is something about this being more Jack's inner demons versus an actual family dynamic breakdown. But I also find the last shot of the movie to be a little bit too explanatory that these are just generations of ghosts hanging out.
The zoom in. And they're like
I
on his face for so long. You're like, we
Yeah.
get it. We got it.
Yeah.
He's the guy in the 20s. We got it.
yeah, if you're gonna
He's
do
always
that
been there.
one track, yeah, if you're gonna
Always
do that one track, like that shot in, just do the one and then go to black. I didn't know why we needed 3 different and hey, just in case you missed it, it's 1921 in
And then
this
they
picture.
zoom down to the date.
Yeah. I found I think that there's a much more powerful ending to the movie if you just, and this is, it's hard to end movies and books, but I think, if you just end on the icy structure of Jack sitting there in the maze, frozen to death, that tells you everything that you need to know.
Yeah, I like that. And his face, like with his teeth out, like he has so many moments in this movie where his face is just absolutely incredible. And that's one of them too. He's like frozen in that. Yeah. I liked the ending of the book, though. I liked the big explosion. I kind of forgot about the epilogue.
Yeah.
I don't remember what happens
I
in
don't
that at
think
all.
you.
It's
I don't
weird.
think you need epilogues like generally. Actually, that's not true. The thing I just wrote has an epilogue. Never
I was
mind.
just about to say, doesn't your book have an epilogue? It's
Anyway,
good
epilogues
too.
are
I like
awesome.
it. Yeah.
This is live editing here, guys. Go back, cut that shit out, and give us a powerful ending that we just
Exactly.
walk away and
Uh,
no, I mean, I think that like there's what would King have done 10 years later had he written this book? I think the part of the magic of this book is that he wrote it so early in his career. Whereas like for Kubrick, this is the third to last movie he ever made. So by this
Wow,
point,
that's
he
crazy.
knows how to make a movie. He knows what he's trying to say. So you have two different people at like various points, but even still, I think Kubrick kind of bungled the ending a little bit.
Even the masters make mistakes, I guess.
It's really hard to finish a story,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you've lived with it for so long. What are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Well, and it's technically the most important part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Right.
like when I write a poem, like it has to end in a way that's super powerful, or it's the whole thing's been done.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to do. Yeah.
It's why Whiplash is one of the greatest movies of all time because it's got one of the greatest endings of all time, and that's a very hard thing to do.
I love that movie.
What do you guys, when you think about, are there any comparisons to the book and the movie that you have read elsewhere that you would like to dive into here at this point in the episode?
There's a couple movies that I thought of. I just recently, within the last year, watched The Lighthouse, which is
Great call.
absolutely
Yeah.
crazy about
Yeah.
madness, isolation, absolutely crazy movie, just so shadowy and scary. And I also just recently watched Nope. And I think that whole genre of like Get Out, Nope, these psychological thrillers that are really comments on who we are as people and how our psychology affects and making those into horror films. I think that's really kind of fun, modern comps for movies.
It's a great call.
I think in terms of books, I will. I mean, in terms of the house being the possessor of the spirit of everyone inside it. Which there's a couple books I would recommend. Like, I mean, Rebecca is definitely like that, right, Megan?
Yes, that was on my list for books. Yeah.
So I think that is. There was also another book that I read recently that I can't remember. I think it was probably a more like commercial mystery book that had kind of a similar vibe, but yeah, Rebecca came to mind immediately.
I would say The Haunting of Hill House. That's probably the most famous kind of haunted house movie or book. Excuse me.
Just looking at my so Shining is number 8 on my all-time favorites film list. Looking at a few other movies that I would recommend similar to this. Recently came out. Slightly different, but like a very great example of what happens in the mind of someone at kind of a creative crossroads is Tar, which was one of my favorite
Ooh, I love
movies
that
of this
movie.
decade. And it has kind of I think does the ending that this has a little bit better, but just like a brilliant composer in a very public, rather than the isolation, this is more public breakdown, and then what happens as a result of that. I think from a pure horror standpoint and the way that this movie uses light, I would recommend Midsommar, which does an amazing job of showcasing this idea that like even outside of the shadows, true horror can happen and can really, take you in a really fascinating way. From a family horror standpoint, I think Parasite is a really great comp here.
Yeah.
And the idea of like the struggle in an economic setting and how horror doesn't necessarily need to be a zombie or a ghost. Horror can be literally the fact that you cannot feed your family.
Yeah.
Wow, that movie's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm too scared to watch Midsommar, but
I'm going to watch it. I got it on my
you
list.
are?
Yep.
It's truly amazing.
I mean,
I
my
know,
list
I'm so
is
scared, though.
list is long. Yeah. Did you guys ever read
Trying to
any
think
ton
about-
of? Have you read any ton of French? Sorry, just off of the.
Yeah, I read one of hers.
There's one called
I
The
have
Witch
not read
Elm, which is like she's a little more commercial, but there's one called The Witch Elm, which is really good and it has like a lot of similarities in terms of like place and crazy kind of thriller kind of vibes. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
Someone's asking me in the chat if I saw The Witch, but I've never seen it. And it sounds really scary.
Yeah,
Have
it's
you guys
pretty
seen that?
terrifying.
Yeah. I don't watch a lot of horror
Terrifying.
movies. I'm not really into that, but I've always loved The Shining. And maybe because I saw it when I was younger, and because I really appreciate Kubrick, but I've always saw it as not a traditional horror movie. I don't know. It's different. I don't like the genre in general. I guess it's more of a psychological thriller anyway, but it has horror elements, obviously, but I don't
Kubrick
love being
joked before
scared.
they started filming the movie that he wanted to make something so scary that if you sat all the way through it, you would get your money back. And then
I
the
mean,
studio said, we're not going to support that.
the Blair Witch Project is the scariest movie I've ever seen in the movie theaters, and that I barely could sit through. So
Interesting.
Yeah. That's a scary movie for sure.
I guess when it came out, nobody had any context. I think it's
I
hard.
didn't
The
know what
aging
it
of that is challenging.
was.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know what it was, and I was in the movie theater and quite high, and we were all like, what is actually happening? And it was terrifying. It seemed so real, and I barely made it through.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at my books. I don't think I've read anything as comparable to this. I mean, I think
everything's
that
comparable. Everything's comparable to the bee sting in terms of internal struggles with middle age. And I mean, you can make a comparison with anything with the bee sting, in my opinion. But I do think that's like in terms of the main character trying to figure out middle age and navigating a bunch of disasters not well.
trying to figure out a comparison to Lonesome Dove in that same sort of manner. All Jack is looking for in room 217 or 237, depending on which story you're consuming, is just a poke. And when that doesn't happen, he loses his mind. And so, imagine if Gus hadn't gotten a poke, what he would have done up and down the Front Range.
That's
Oh
such
my
a good
God.
point.
The look on Jack's face when he sees the woman out of the bathtub and he's watching her and his like mouth is starting to smile and it's twitching really slowly and it's aligned perfectly with the strings. The music is like, it's
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
I mean, that's another thing. Like that scene, just the way that woman opens the shower curtain and then climbs out of the bathroom, and like her legs are long to the point that they almost look like alien in a way. Like she's so gorgeous, but she looks kind of like a monster herself. Just the way that he has her coming out of the bathtub, the way that the music's working. Like there are images like that I think they're almost stand-ins for 30 pages of writing that you can't spend all that time exploring. You have to just kind of show that all in one shot in a film. And he does such a brilliant job with that.
Yeah. And that scene, like, that like something bad's going to happen, but you don't know when it's going to happen. So yeah, is it like when her leg comes out, it's going to like grow fins, or is it, you're just kind of like, when is this happening? And so you wait for it and it takes a lot longer than you expect. And yeah, it's great. Good stuff.
Spielberg talked with Kubrick about the movie as Kubrick was writing it. And Kubrick asked him what he thought the scariest part of the movie was. And Spielberg said, I think it's the fact that this kid is losing his mind and his parents don't know what's going on. And Stanley said, no, that's not nearly the scariest part. The scariest part is the woman in the bathtub. And so that's like why that is a scene that it's like so emphasized in the movie.
It's great.
Well, I think that we've done it here. Do we have anything else we want to say about The Shining the novel, The Shining the film, or Fluffhead the song?
Well, I just want to say, if people like this crossover, I want them to let us know, because I think it's a cool way to look at two different kinds of art in a way that got me thinking in a way that I really like. So I'm curious, maybe we'll do more of these. I don't even know what we're doing next for Library Card. I think we're still deciding.
Yeah, we are
We're gonna
meeting
do a
as a
novel.
team to figure out what our upcoming library card episode is. Keep an eye out that I know that at some point in the next 4 weeks we are going to do a very special Thanksgiving themed blockbuster card episode. So keep an eye out that. And if you know anything about Thanksgiving films, there's really only one. So we will be announcing that here shortly. But yeah, we'll also be announcing whatever our upcoming library card book selection is.
Well, thanks everyone for
Awesome.
joining us. Yeah, and happy reading. We'll see you next time.
Happy filming too.
Bye, everyone.